Right-wing politicians and organizations like ALEC want the rich to get richer, the poor to get poorer, and to destroy the middle class.
And this is immoral.
ALEC is the mechanism that corporations use to control public policy, not only here in the state of Arizona, but around the country. It is policy that is designed to enrich the richest corporations in the country at the expense of the middle class and at the expense of voters.
Here in Arizona, our office has been focused on criminal justice reform, and in that capacity, we've been following the rise of privatization of prisons over the last 15 years in Arizona. And I'm here to tell you that ALEC is not new to the business of writing laws to put more people in prison. The so-called tough-on-crime legislation of the 1990s was almost all due to ALEC model legislation, things like 3 strikes and you're out, truth in sentencing, mandatory sentencing laws. So immigrant detention is simply the new growth industry for the prison industrial complex, and these corporations, through ALEC, are now writing bills to get tough on immigrants.
To me, this is a very personal issue because I am also undocumented. I have really grown up in this country since I was 11 years old, and I have seek to be here, just seeking the American dream and really just going to college and doing everything that we all look to do. And it is very unfortunate that these individuals are trying to really incarcerate my family, really incarcerate my friends and myself just to really get profit out of it.
It's only when we understand the depth of the influence of this industry in Arizona that we can make sense of the actions of our legislators and governor. Otherwise, their single-minded devotion to the failed experiment of prison privatization would seem utterly insane. Decades of evidence overwhelmingly shows that for-profit prisons are more expensive, less safe, and are not accountable to the taxpayers of Arizona. The Department of Corrections has shown for the last 6 years that the state is losing money on this experiment, yet the legislators' response is, don't bother me with the facts. If the government and the legislature cannot prove using independent, objective data that their claims of cost savings and public safety are real, then we are left with 2 possible conclusions. That our state leaders are so ideologically wedded to the idea of privatization that they are unable or unwilling to face reality, or that they are beholden to the for-profit prison industry and that this industry has such unmitigated power in Arizona that it has simply hijacked the democratic process. Private prison companies are dependent on an ever-increasing supply of inmates in order to stay solvent. When human beings become the raw material in a business, there is an inherent pressure on the company to increase the input of people into its system, and a disincentive for the companies to accomplish what we all think of as the primary mission of a correctional institution, to reform and rehabilitate prisoners. It also creates an incentive to tinker with the laws that criminalize more behaviors and types of people in order to keep those prison beds full. This process has nothing to do with protecting the public or reducing crime. Arizona's recidivism rate is around 50%, and the private corporations don't even bother to measure theirs. It has to do with making money, and that's ALEC's specialty.
Laws like SB 1070, sponsored by ALEC and spreading across the country, criminalize migrant workers, criminalize families, and criminalize DREAM Act students, and this is immoral. As a person of faith, we must welcome the stranger, we must love our neighbors, and we must protect our families, the hard workers of this country, both migrant workers, citizen workers, and we must stand for the human rights of all people in this country.
Through ALEC, legislators are sitting side by side with lobbyists and groups to draft education legislation that serves the interests of those who want to privatize our education system. No teacher input, no student input, corporate input. Drafting education policies that turn our public schools into a profit-making endeavor. Another side-by-side comparison shows how ALEC was able to get legislation introduced that funnels our public tax dollars to private schools through scholarships or the parental grants that would pay parents our tax dollars for sending their students to private school. The parents and the taxpayers in my neighborhood have not been clamoring for these changes. Instead, they have been asking for adequately funded neighborhood schools that provide full-day kindergarten, smaller class sizes, and training that support teachers. In 2009 and 2010, Arizona legislators cut or withheld over $500 million from Arizona's already underfunded school system. Full-day kindergarten eliminated. Teachers and staff were reduced as class sizes rose. And yet at the same time, legislators introduced legislation to expand tuition tax credits and pass voucher bills. Even after voters taxed themselves in 2010, passing Proposition 100, legislators made hundreds of millions of dollars in school cuts.
ALEC's Voter ID Act came to Arizona as Proposition 200 and requires now that citizens present a photo ID or two approved written forms of identification in order to register to vote. This, ladies and gentlemen, is called voter suppression. As of 2008, Proposition 200 barred over 30,000 citizens from registering. This is fraudulent. It is our right as citizens to vote and to not be suppressed when trying to register to do that.
Through shadowy organizations like the American Legislative Exchange Council, large corporations are using their vast financial resources and power to take political control of our democracy.
Right-wing politicians and organizations like ALEC want the rich to get richer, the poor to get poorer, and to destroy the middle class. It's as clear now as it was 100 years ago in the struggle for a fair wage, for a fair day's pay. We need to educate ourselves, take action, and become united in our resolve to oppose such anti-worker, anti-American, and anti-middle class legislation. The bottom line is this: these people, we make America strong, not them. We make this country run, not them, and we represent American values, not them.
Not everything that comes out of ALEC is good legislation, and it doesn't always have the support or interests of all of corporate America. Over the past year, several studies have been released that look at the impacts these laws have had on Arizona and on every other jurisdiction in the country where these laws have been introduced and passed. Well, here's the news story. They don't work. They don't work anywhere, not even close. There is no study from any source that shows that these laws are good for business, jobs, tax revenues, reduced spending, nothing.
The story of ALEC here in Arizona, some of the most divisive, controversial bills that this legislature has been consumed with have been pushed by ALEC and pushed by corporations. They have been using legislators as pawns to stuff taxpayers' dollars in their own pockets.
The message is clear. We as citizens are the conscience of our legislative process. We are now informed citizenry, and we will not deter from being that conscience. We will not step down from our essential role in our democratic process in Arizona. We will no longer tolerate Pierce-like extreme legislation or political rhetoric. Together, as citizens, we can ensure that this message continues forward strongly and boldly, that we as citizens deserve a better Arizona.